Now let's think about what we actually know about abusive relationships. If you were lucky enough to grow up in a loving home where your parents never raised their voices, your understanding of abuse might come mostly from things you've read online or heard in conversations with friends or co-workers. But the reality of abuse is often much deeper than we realize. It's about controlling and limiting another person's freedom. Today, we'll focus on one of the most severe forms of abuse, the restriction of personal freedom. Abusive individuals often feel they have the right to dictate every aspect of their partner's life: who they can talk to, who their friends are, where they can go, what they can wear, and even what time they should come home. It sounds terrible, right? But what's even more disturbing is that these abusers often believe they're being generous by allowing their partners certain freedoms that wouldn't even be questioned in a healthy relationship. Our story today is about a woman who refused to live under such controlling rules, and it ultimately cost her her life. We'll explore whether there was genuine abuse in this case, or if the public simply wanted to label the husband as an abuser to hold him responsible for his wife's tragic death. Let's set the scene in Cary, North Carolina, a perfect town for a quiet family life. It's so safe that residents, after living there for years, stop locking their cars or even the front doors of their homes. There's virtually no crime, no racial tension, great schools, open roads, and friendly neighbors. This was the town where the Coopers chose to build their family and start a happy life together. Brad and Nancy Cooper seemed to have it all. Brad was a smart, successful engineer, while Nancy was athletic, beautiful, fun-loving, and a wonderful mum to their two young daughters. On the outside, their life looked perfect. Brad focused on his work, while Nancy managed the home and cared for their children. Nancy, a former competitive runner, stayed in great shape and took excellent care of herself. But everything changed on July 12, 2008, a day that started just like any other. Nancy went out for her usual morning run, but never came back. What unfolded after that was disturbing, complicated, and left everyone questioning what really happened. The events that followed were so tragic that both Nancy's and Brad's families were left with nothing but questions and a faint hope for justice. That afternoon, Jessica Adam, a close friend of Nancy's, made a frantic call to emergency services to report Nancy missing. Her voice was shaky as she explained to the dispatcher that Nancy had gone out for a run at 7 a.m., but hadn't returned home. The two friends had plans to meet up, but Nancy never showed. Even more concerning was that Jessica had been trying to reach her for hours, but Nancy wasn't answering her cell phone or her home phone. Brad, Nancy's husband, was at work at the time and didn't seem too worried at first. He assumed Nancy had taken a longer walk than usual and would be back soon. But as the hours passed and evening came, Nancy was still nowhere to be found. To understand where Nancy might have gone, we need to dig deeper into the history of the Cooper family. Perhaps the answers we're looking for are hidden in their past. Let's go back to the 1960s. At the University of British Columbia, two graduates, Harry Wren and Donna Audrey, decided to get married. Over the next few years, they had 4 children: a son named Jeff and 3 daughters, Krista, Jill, and Nancy. They raised their family in Edmonton, providing a loving and supportive home. In 1988, Harry and Donna started an employment agency that helped people in Alberta, Canada with life management, job training, and employment services. Nancy, one of their daughters, was born on October 25, 1973, as an identical twin to her sister, Krista. Nancy's life took a turn when she met Brad Cooper in Calgary in 1998. She was just 24 years old at the time. Brad was tall with dark hair, and he immediately caught Nancy's attention not just for his looks, but also for his calm and steady demeanor. He was reliable, like a rock, and Nancy fell in love quickly. The feeling was mutual. Nancy was tall, blonde, fit, and had a quiet charisma that drew Brad in. Their relationship blossomed, and before long, Brad received a prestigious job offer from Cisco Systems in Raleigh, North Carolina. He wanted Nancy to move with him to the United States. So to make the immigration process smoother and to stay together, Brad and Nancy got married in the fall of 2000. On the surface, it seemed like a fairy tale, but some wondered if the marriage was partly for immigration reasons. What started as a love story took a dark turn, leading to the tragic events of that summer day in 2008. So Nancy could move with Brad, but the couple had already been planning a wedding for the fall of 2002. After relocating to North Carolina, Brad quickly started building his career at one of the largest tech companies, while Nancy found herself thrust into the role of a stay-at-home mom. Brad's career at Cisco Systems took off. He became a specialist in integrating internet technologies and phone systems, working as a voice-over enterprise engineer and architect. Brad was one of only 152 experts in networking technology globally, which put him in high demand. The family lived quite comfortably, each of them even had their own BMW parked in the driveway. But despite the outward signs of success, Nancy was slowly becoming a prisoner in her own home. As a Canadian citizen living in the US, Nancy could visit but wasn't legally allowed to work without a proper permit. In the following years, the couple had two beautiful daughters, Bella, born in 2004, and Katie, born in 2006. Neighbors described Nancy as a devoted, hands-on mother who was often seen playing with her kids at the local playground. But beyond being a great mom, Nancy longed for more. She couldn't get a job in the US due to her visa status, and while she could have tried to find some under-the-table work, she dreamed of having a real career, something beyond just being a wife and mother. Now, let's shift our focus to Brad. Brad Graham Cooper was born in the early 1970s in Medicine Hat, Alberta. After high school, he went on to earn a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from the University of Calgary. His career started at TransCanada Pipelines, where he worked as a network engineer. It was in 1998 that he crossed paths with Nancy Renz, and the attraction was instant. As their relationship grew, Brad became close to Nancy's family as well. He impressed them with his tech skills, often helping out with their computers and joining in on family gatherings. Brad's talent and expertise eventually led to a job offer from Cisco Systems in Raleigh, North Carolina. By 2005, he had also started working toward an MBA at North Carolina State University's College of Management, specializing in product innovation. His professional life was on an upward trajectory as he kept adding to his skill set and credentials. While Brad's career was skyrocketing, Nancy's dreams were quietly slipping away. She had once been a competitive runner with aspirations of making it to the Olympics. But after moving to the US and becoming a mother, she had to give up her ambitions and her own career goals. Instead, she found herself living in Brad's shadow, unable to pursue the dreams she once had. A bad knee ended Nancy's dreams of competing at the Olympic level, but she didn't let that stop her love for running. She continued to participate in marathons and other races, bringing new people into the running community and making friends along the way. This social side of Nancy's life bothered Brad, who was more introverted and preferred to keep to himself. Before long, their relationship started to fall apart. According to friends, cracks in Brad and Nancy's marriage had been there from the beginning, but Nancy never spoke about their problems publicly. She tended to idealize Brad, portraying him as a perfect husband. On the outside, they still looked like the perfect family, but behind closed doors, things were different. As Brad climbed higher in his career, he became more controlling and manipulative. He saw Nancy as just a boring housewife who had lost her spark, spending her days cleaning and taking care of their children. The real turning point came when Nancy discovered that Brad was cheating on her with one of her close friends, Heather, in the spring of 2007. Brad denied the affair for months, but on New Year's Eve, he finally admitted to it. He claimed it was a one-time thing, as if that made it any better. The couple decided to try to salvage their marriage and began going to couples therapy. However, during one of their sessions, Brad confessed that his affair with Heather had actually been ongoing for a long time. This revelation was the final straw. Nancy and Brad decided to separate and put their house up for sale. Nancy planned to move back to Canada with their two daughters, Bella and Katie, to start fresh. However, Brad wasn't willing to let her take the kids to another country. In a bid to keep control, he cut off Nancy's financial resources, canceling her credit cards and leaving her stranded in the US, with no money to survive. She was alone, in a foreign country, with two young children and no way to support herself. Now let's go back to the day of Nancy's disappearance. When news spread about the couple's troubled marriage, Nancy's friends and the authorities immediately suspected Brad had something to do with her going missing. Nancy's parents, Harry and Donna Wren, were filled with dread when they heard their daughter was missing. They immediately made plans to fly to Cary, North Carolina, to help search for her. As the hours passed and there was still no sign of Nancy, the police arrived at the Cooper home to question Brad. He told them that he had no idea where his wife was, but his calm demeanor raised suspicions. According to him, Nancy had simply gone for her morning run, as usual, and never returned. On that Saturday morning, Brad claimed Nancy got up earlier than usual to go for a run with a friend. He also mentioned that she didn't take her cell phone or keys with her, which was unusual. According to Brad, she skipped her normal routine of driving to a coffee shop to meet her running partner. Despite being an experienced runner who was training for a half marathon, Nancy supposedly changed her route that day, opting not to run on her usual trails. The police listened carefully to Brad's account, but they were puzzled. No one other than Brad had seen Nancy that morning. They needed solid evidence to back up his claim that she left the house at 7 a.m. Who else had seen her leaving? Was there anyone who saw her getting into a car or even walking down the street that morning? Unfortunately, there were no witnesses. No one saw Nancy after she spent Friday night with a friend across the street. Brad claimed that she had plans to meet her running partner later that day, but that friend confirmed they never met up. A search party was quickly organized to find the missing runner. Could Nancy have run away to escape her troubled marriage? Her friends didn't think so, especially not without taking her children with her. After several days of intense searching, the tragic discovery was made. Nancy Cooper's body was found about 3 miles from her home, off her regular running route. A man walking his dog came across her body lying face down in a drainage ditch. She was found in a stormwater drain, wearing only a sports bra, with a single diamond earring still in one ear. The medical examiner determined that Nancy's cause of death was strangulation, with a broken hyoid bone a clear sign of manual strangulation. However, there were no other injuries or signs of sexual assault on her body. Now, the police needed to find a motive because, as with every murder, there was one to uncover. As soon as Nancy's body was found, suspicion immediately fell on Brad. He was the most obvious suspect given the circumstances. Shortly after Carey investigators confirmed that her death was indeed a homicide, they conducted a thorough search of the Cooper home, seizing several items as part of their investigation. In a surprising twist, they found Nancy Cooper's phone and keys inside the house. Despite Brad's earlier claim that she had gone out without them, friends of Nancy insisted that she always took her phone and keys with her when she left the house, which only deepened the mystery. When police interviewed Brad Cooper on the day Nancy went missing, they noticed small red marks and scratches on the back of his neck. This added another layer of suspicion, as those marks could potentially be defensive wounds from a struggle. The evidence was starting to pile up against Brad, but investigators knew they needed more concrete proof to make their case. This detail was noted in the police report, but no official explanation was provided. It was also confirmed that no one, except Brad Cooper, had seen Nancy after she attended a neighbor's party alone on Friday night. Although she spoke to a friend on the phone around 10:30 p.m. that evening, no one had any contact with her afterward. As investigators continued their search for evidence related to Nancy Cooper's death, they quickly zeroed in on a prime suspect, Brad Cooper. The dynamics of the couple's relationship caught their attention, especially since Brad was the last person known to have seen Nancy alive. In most homicide cases, investigators start by looking at the spouse, ruling them out before considering other suspects. The fact that Brad was the last person to see her alive put him firmly in their sights. The evidence gathered was enough for the police to issue overnight warrants to search the Coopers' home, their 2 vehicles, and Brad Cooper himself. The urgency was clear. They treated the house and cars as potential crime scenes, looking for any clues that could connect Brad to Nancy's death. Using luminol, they checked for blood stains and other potential evidence in the house and vehicles. Additionally, they collected Brad's hair, fingerprints, and DNA to compare with any evidence found at the scene where Nancy's body was discovered. Investigators were also interested in examining any cuts, scratches, or marks on Brad's body. Given that the Coopers were married, lived together, and often shared a car, any physical evidence would need to be explained within the context of their daily family life. Still, there were some peculiar details that stood out to the investigators. One odd detail that came to light was Brad's behavior on the morning Nancy went missing. It was reported that he spent the morning doing an unusual amount of household cleaning, laundry, vacuuming, and mopping the floors. Brad admitted to buying bleach and other cleaning supplies the day before. This raised red flags for the police, as it seemed strange for him to be deep cleaning the house on the very day his wife disappeared. While buying cleaning supplies isn't inherently suspicious, the timing made investigators wonder if Brad had a more sinister reason for his actions. Was he trying to cover up evidence? Or was it merely a coincidence that he chose that particular day for a thorough house cleaning? The police had their suspicions, but they needed more concrete proof to move forward. The police collected multiple boxes and bags of potential evidence from the Cooper home, all of which needed to be examined to determine if they were connected to Nancy's death. According to the police, the information Brad Cooper provided about his extensive cleaning didn't align with what friends and acquaintances of the Coopers knew about him. In official testimony, police also mentioned that Brad had cleaned the trunk of Nancy's car but hadn't touched the interior. He claimed he spilled gasoline in the trunk, but officers noted they couldn't detect any smell of gas or cleaning fluids. At the time of Nancy's death, Brad and Nancy, both Canadian citizens, were in the process of separating, with Nancy planning to return to Canada with their children. However, in April 2008, Brad took steps to block this. He removed Nancy's name from their bank accounts and credit cards and held onto the kids' passports to prevent them from leaving the US. Investigators also searched Brad's computer for any evidence, such as documents related to killing or disposing of a body. Detective Adam Dismukes noted that certain parts of the Cooper home, like the front hallway, hinted at a possible struggle when Nancy returned from her neighbor's party. Reviewing dozens of photos taken during the initial missing persons investigation, Dismukes observed that some decorative items, like ducks on a credenza and bamboo sticks in a vase, were missing from the hallway, which could suggest a struggle. However, Brad's lawyer, Howard Kurtz, argued that if there had been a struggle, other items in the hallway, like a lamp, would also have been disturbed. He pointed out there were no scuff marks on the floor and no signs that the police searched for the missing items. Other items in the house, such as a glass coffee table, a lamp in the living room, and a computer in the home office, were untouched, furthering Kurtz's argument. In a later interview, Brad Cooper expressed his feeling that the investigators had already decided he was guilty when they first searched his home. Based on their findings, police testified that they believed Brad strangled Nancy in their Cary home and then disposed of her body a few miles away. "I believe Nancy Cooper came home early on the morning of July 12th, and Mr. Cooper killed her," Detective Dismukes stated. With what they felt was sufficient evidence, police arrested 37-year-old Brad Cooper in October 2008, over 3 months after Nancy's body was discovered 3 miles from their home in Cary. Brad Cooper's trial did not begin until over 2 years after his arrest, starting in March 2011. The trial lasted for 36 days, during which both the prosecution and defense presented their cases. Despite Brad maintaining his innocence throughout the proceedings, the jury ultimately found him guilty of first-degree murder. As a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Brad was having an affair and had become increasingly controlling and abusive toward Nancy. They suggested that he murdered her to free himself from their marriage and continue his affair. Evidence presented during the trial indicated that Brad had cut Nancy off from their joint bank accounts, and she had told friends about her plans to move back to Canada with their 2 daughters. Jury foreman Andy Gilbert explained that the jurors began the trial with an open mind, viewing Brad as innocent until proven guilty. However, the testimony of 2 FBI agents, Gregory Johnson and Chris Chappell, played a crucial role in swaying the jury's decision. They presented evidence of internet searches found on Brad's laptop, including maps of the area where Nancy's body was later discovered. According to Gilbert, this digital evidence made other circumstantial details more compelling and credible. The prosecution highlighted that Brad initially agreed to a divorce and the division of their assets, but he changed his mind when he realized how financially costly it would be. Defense lawyers countered that Brad's actions, like closing joint accounts, were meant to protect their finances from falling apart, not to harm Nancy. They also argued that he opposed Nancy's move to Canada because he feared losing frequent access to his children. In 2011, Brad pled not guilty, but after the jury deliberated for about 10 hours over 3 days, they reached a unanimous guilty verdict on May 5th. The jury, composed of 10 women and 2 men, concluded that Brad Cooper, driven by anger and frustration, meticulously planned and carried out his wife's murder in the early hours of July 12, 2008. The case became the longest non-death penalty murder trial in Wake County's history, with nearly 100 witnesses testifying over the course of 36 days. The prosecution painted Brad as a husband fed up with his wife, who decided to eliminate her rather than go through a costly divorce. After Brad Cooper was convicted of first-degree murder in 2011, Nancy's parents filed a petition in court, alleging that Brad had been emotionally abusive and had been involved in an affair. They also claimed that he was emotionally unstable and a danger to the couple's 2 children. Court documents revealed that Brad had attempted suicide multiple times, both as a teenager and more recently, in the winter of 2013. In 2013, Brad appealed to have his conviction overturned, arguing for a retrial. During this time, he pled guilty to second-degree murder and received a sentence of 12 to 15 years, including time already served. His guilty plea resulted in the forfeiture of his parental rights, allowing Nancy's twin sister to gain custody of their daughters. Brad's defense team continued to fight the conviction, claiming they had a strong case for an appeal. They argued that the jury had never been allowed to see evidence suggesting that Brad's laptop had been tampered with, and they claimed that the police had focused too much on Brad as the sole suspect, disregarding other potential evidence that could have pointed to a different killer. The question remained, was Brad Cooper a victim of circumstances, or was he a manipulative and controlling individual? His past suicide attempts raised questions about his motivations, as suicidal tendencies can sometimes be linked to manipulative behavior when used to exert control over others. Brad continued to maintain his innocence throughout the trial, but in 2015, he finally confessed to the murder. Brad admitted to strangling Nancy during an argument and then disposing of her body in a drainage ditch. At 40 years old, he pled guilty in Wake County Superior Court to the second-degree murder of his wife. His first-degree murder conviction was overturned by the North Carolina Court of Appeals, and Judge Paul Gessner sentenced Brad to 12 years in prison, taking into account the 5 years he had already served. Brad Cooper's sentence was reduced from life without parole to a minimum of 12 years following his successful appeal. Despite the delay in his confession, he finally acknowledged his role in Nancy's death, explaining that he had killed her in a moment of anger before abandoning her body, dressed only in a bra, in a drainage ditch. Before Brad Cooper reported his wife Nancy missing after her run, he finally admitted in court to killing her. This was the first time he acknowledged the crime, telling the judge that he had murdered Nancy, the mother of their 2 children, and hidden her body at a construction site in Cary, North Carolina, in 2008. Prosecutors revealed that Brad, now in his 50s, had been having affairs with multiple women, including a neighbor, while Nancy was trying to end their marriage and move back to Canada. Brad relinquished his parental rights to daughters Katie, 8, and Bella, 10, who were adopted by Nancy's sister, Krista, as part of a plea deal. Nancy's father, Harry Wren, expressed relief, saying they finally got the justice they sought for Nancy's death. Nancy, a 34-year-old athlete, had been in a troubled marriage. After asking Brad to leave, he refused, leading to tragic consequences. Brad served 12 years in prison and was deported to Canada in 2020, where he now lives, barred from contacting his daughters. This case is a stark reminder of the dangers of domestic violence and the need to recognize warning signs. Stay safe, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories.